Ronald Acuña Jr. is a full go for this upcoming season and will be joining Venezuela in the World Baseball Classic. Certainly good news for Braves fans to hear that he is ready to go for this season. We'll talk about that, also answer a lot of your Twitter questions, and I got Grant McCauley joining the show as well to help me with that as we get geared up for spring training. So we'll cover all that on this episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast, and we'll talk about them on the podcast, as we're going to do today, answering your Twitter questions. Also, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube if you're new, of over 4,000 subscribers, so really appreciate that. And if you're watching this video, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button. As always, thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Missed an episode this week because next week we're getting back to 5 episodes a week, so taking a little break there before we get geared up for spring training in the start of 2023. So starting next week, we'll be back to having an episode every weekday, so looking forward to that. And before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you that it's brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. And visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And to get started with this episode, we're going to be bringing in Grant McCauley. Grant, welcome back. Getting ready for spring training.
Yeah, counting down the days. I'm going to be heading down to Northport. I'll be reporting right about the time pitchers and catchers report and getting all those workouts, talk to all these guys, see how they are feeling as they get ready for the 2023 season. We have made it through the winter, Jake. I didn't know if we would, but we did. I think we always do.
We barely made it. Some of the takes this week have been a little out there. I think people are getting quite bored at this point of the off season. Yeah, we need to see some baseball on the field, and we're going to see a little bit of that even earlier than opening day this year with the World Baseball Classic. We're going to see some games that mean a lot to, I think, a lot of people. I know some people just call it a glorified spring training, but for a lot of those, especially other countries, this is something they really get into. I think it's very exciting, and I think it's going to be even more exciting now because Ronald Acuña Jr. is going to be part of it. And anytime he's on the field, and I know it's going to mean a lot to him and his country, to represent his country, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But Grant, I think maybe the bigger news for Braves fans is the fact that they said he's going to full go. There was going to be no limitations for him in spring training. And that was certainly, great to hear for me, because I just want a full healthy season for Ronald Acuña Jr., put up that MVP type level of performance that I think a lot of us know he can do.
Yeah, and nobody wants it worse than Ronald Acuña Jr. I know every Braves fan does. I know the Braves themselves do, and every single one of his teammates. But for Ronald, having that chance to kind of get back to being himself again after that year of really having to play through something that he'd never dealt with before in a major knee injury, all of the rehab, and then all of the maintenance and all of the things I feel like that went with that, it was kind of a new experience for him. And in 2022 was not the Ronald Acuña Jr. we're accustomed to seeing. So I think what the kids are calling that is the revenge tour. That's what we should be expecting here in 2023. And I know he's excited about getting back to feeling 100%. But secondly, and really to start things off, this World Baseball Classic thing means a lot to him. I think it means a lot to a great contingent, especially the Latin American players. I know there's some Team USA pride, and Freddie Freeman's going to be, I think, captaining that Team Canada. And there's so many other clubs and countries that are going to be a part of this. But I think it's just something special about it for a lot of those Latin American countries. Ronald went down and played in Venezuela over the course of the winter. When we caught up to him in Fan Fest, I walked away with two things. Number one, Ronald's been working hard. He looks good. He looks excited to get to playing baseball. And kind of secondly, I felt like he had that itch to be involved in that World Baseball Classic, but it just didn't seem like that had been agreed upon at that point. And then all of a sudden we got this news that it is. So he's going to represent Venezuela. But I think another thing for Ronald that he's going to be pretty pumped about, getting to play with Miguel Cabrera. That's somebody he's looked up to for a very long time, one of the great Venezuelan baseball players of all time. A really cool thing for Ronald, in addition to being able to take part in this tournament in general.
It is, and I'm really excited for him. Look, as a Braves fan, and I get it from a Braves perspective, they want him, in camp, getting ready for their upcoming season. But I know it means a lot to him, and so I'm glad that he was able to do that. And should be a lot of fun. Some other Braves players: Eddie Rosario will be playing for Puerto Rico, Chadwick Trump for the Netherlands, Alan Rangel for Mexico, as well as Royal Ramirez. So Braves got some other players in there that you can watch. And I've been watching the Caribbean series, Orlando Arcia playing for Venezuela in there. And those are fun games to watch. So that'll be happening there in March. Now, report dates: pitchers and catchers who are in the World Baseball Classic, they'll report this Monday. Non-WBC participants, pitchers and catchers, report that Wednesday. And then World Baseball Classic position players like Acuna will report on February 16th, and then non-World Baseball Classic position players on February 20th. First full squad workout on the 21st, and then first game on the 25th. So it is coming. It is close, and certainly excited about that. The other thing I want to mention before we get into these questions is just the Michael Harris, I don't know, it's a documentary, whatever you want to call it, they had on YouTube. I saw the Battery Carlisle Road, and the chat says that he just watched it. Braves feature about Michael Harris, highly recommended. I watched it just before we jumped on as well, and yes, I highly recommend it. It was a great watch. Grant, I don't know if you got a chance to see it yet, but just love that kid even more now. And if you're looking to get geared up for the season, certainly go watch that. It was great to see, especially when you look at where he's come from and being a local kid. I mean, it makes it so much more exciting to see what he's come from and just the hard work that he's put in to get where he is.
Yeah, and Michael Harris, if you watched anything or took anything out of that, he has wanted to be an Atlanta Brave seemingly his entire life. So very cool to see that has happened for him. Even cooler to know that he's going to be hanging around for the rest of the decade. And just another day where you can really just kind of look at this club, the future of this club, and get genuinely excited about it, because fixtures of this team that grow up through the minor league system and they grow up in Braves country, they seem to find a way to stick around. And Michael Harris, I mean, I think the best is yet to come for him, and 2023 could be just another shining example of that.
Yeah, just can't wait to get into the season. Like I said, if you weren't excited enough, and I've already watched a couple of my favorite baseball movies since the calendar turned to February, but if you want to get even more pumped up, make sure that you go watch that. The Dream and the Journey, a story about Michael Harris, really good stuff there on the Braves YouTube channel. All right, next I want to get into your Twitter questions. Got a lot of good ones out there that I want to cover. Before we do that, I remind you this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at the Super Bowl party, which is this Sunday, in case you've been living under a rock here. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and we're really excited about them being our new betting partner for Locked On, because they are the #1 sports book in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. You can download the FanDuel app now so that you can get in on that Super Bowl 57 no sweat first bet promotion they have going. You get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And of course, you got the Super Bowl going on this Sunday. You got the Eagles and the Chiefs, I believe. I've almost been sleeping under a rock myself. I kind of forgot about it. But I'm sure they have a lot of bets going on there, a lot of props as well for the Super Bowl, as always. So if you want to go get in on that action, you can go to the FanDuel Sportsbook app, which is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And make sure that you go locked on FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up for that. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Grant, we got a lot of great questions. I want to get into this one. First one from Balefire, and I've seen some of these lists going around. I talked about some of the content this week. Everybody's pushing, looking for things to talk about. But Balefire asked, if you were making an all-star team from the NL East only, who are your starting five? What is your batting order? That's kind of a lot to go over off the top of our heads here, but Grant, I'll let you give it a first crack here. What do you have? Some of the great players in the NL East, obviously.
All right. Well, try not to come at me with the all-star snubs, because I know that's another big thing that goes with setting all-star lineups. I mean, I think I'm going to lead off with Ronald Acuña Jr. I'm going to put him out in right field. Call me a homer if you want, but I think the best center fielder in the division is Michael Harris II. Left field, I'll probably put Kyle Schwarber. He's a pretty good slugger. I like him there. Third base is an interesting one. Austin Riley seems to top most of the lists. I can't really think of anybody to usurp him, at least in the National League East, so he could go there. Trey Turner, welcome back to the NL East. You can start at Shortstop, I'll go Jazz Chisholm at second base. I know they've been talking about moving him. I guess seeing will be believing, but if he is officially moved, then maybe he gets one of these outfield spots. I don't know, but I'm still probably not going to start him over Michael Harris, and those two can argue about it. Maybe it's Ozzy Albies that starts at second base. We'll see. A revenge tour for him would certainly be great. First baseman, I'm going to give Pete Alonso the slight edge over Matt Olson. It's kind of a toss-up for me. They're both great sluggers, and they both obviously mean a lot to the middle of the order. And I'm going to have to go JT Realmuto behind the plate. Are we picking 5 starting pitchers, or can I just name one? What have we decided about that?
He asked for 5, but I'll let you. I'll let you go one. You want to pick one, and then I'll pick one.
Okay, I'll go with Max Scherzer because I do think he's kind of the elder statesman of those starters, though he does have an elder statesman teammates with the Mets this year as well.
I'll go with Sandy Alcantara, the reigning NL Cy Young winner. There's some pretty safe choices in here. I mean, Max, Strider, Nola, Wheeler. I mean, you could run out a pretty deep rotation of NL East starters here.
It's not Patrick Corbin. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, we're not going to put him in here, but this NL East squad, I mean, it would be pretty deadly. So I think you've done a good job there. Next question comes from Gus. He says, I think it's possible we can squeak out 4 2020 guys. Do you think it's possible that aside from Grissom, we can get 3 30-30 guys? Long stretch, I know, but fully healthy, it's not entirely possible. So Grant, this is a good question because I've had a lot of people asking me, can we get 3 40 home run guys? Acuna, Riley, Olson. But with the stolen base coming into effect this year, and I've had people ask, can Michael Harris have a 30-30 season? Can Acuna and Harris have 30-30 seasons? I mean, what's your take? Do we have 4 guys who get 20 homers and 20 stolen bases?
I would be shocked if that's the case, just because that, if it's ever happened before, would have to be extremely rare. And that's when the stolen base was more so a part of the game. Now, the home runs become perhaps as prevalent as it's ever been in this game. So maybe that's the determining factor. If we can, make pitchers have to really focus on the hitter and not be able to throw over to first base a whole lot, maybe we're going to see more stolen bases with the bigger bags and all that stuff. But I'd be surprised to see multiple guys get into 2020. I mean, I think that Ozzy Albies certainly has a chance. He's done it before. Ronald Acuña Jr. came within 3 steals of a 40-40 season in 2019. Michael Harris was a homer away from a 2020 season last year. I could see 3 of them. I don't know who the 4th would really be on my list.
I think he was saying maybe Grissom had the potential to get there.
I mean, I would love that. And I think maybe one day that could happen. I don't think he'll run enough this year. I don't see him stealing 20 bases. Maybe he does, but I feel like there's going to be so many other things that he's focused on this year. I don't think this will be the big base stealing year. He's a good base runner, good athlete. I'm not going to tell you can't steal 20 bases, but to do both of those things in his rookie season, I mean, his first full season, that would be a heck of an accomplishment. But I like what you said about the 40 home run guys. That's one that I might just jump on FanDuel and do some betting about. There's a prop bet with the 340 home run guys, because as you know, I'm doing my player preview series on From the Diamond, and I asked people, what do you think for the duo of Austin Riley and Matt Olson, who combined for well over 70 home runs last year? Can they make a run at 80? And more than a third of the respondents on my poll, and
I voted on that,
thought that they would get 80 home runs. So simple math says that's 2 guys that can hit 40, and Ronald's done it before. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I voted on that. I definitely took the 80 on that. I think they both have a chance. I'm looking for a big year for Matt Olson. That's why I kind of questioned. The one thing I questioned was you putting Pete Alonso over him, because I just think Matt Olson's going to have a huge year, and I'm really pumped up for that and hope that he does. I like the comment in here. If I can go back and find it, where I forget who it was, but they're looking for Ronald Acuña Jr. to have a 50-50 season. Jameson Meza said that. I would love to see that. That would definitely be a revenge tour right there. And again, it would not put it past Ronald Acuña Jr. with the talent that he has. This next question from 4 days till spring training. Since the new pitch clock rule is based on when the pitcher starts his motion, is a violation an open to interpretation call like the infield fly rule? Will managers be able to challenge violation calls? I don't think they're going to be able to challenge it, but I do think it is somewhat of an open to interpretation type of rule.
It is. And again, it's just, you have to begin your motion and be coming to the plate. It's not quite like the shot clock in basketball where it's a violation and, everything lights up. And if it's still in the pitcher's hand, it doesn't count. It's nothing like that. So I think it's something that everybody's going to kind of be learning as we go in spring training, because it's going to be in play immediately in all the Grapefruit and Cactus League games. I know Braves players were asked a lot about this at FanFest. Brian Snitker was asked a lot about this, and everybody has more or less said, let's see what we're, up against. But until we go out there and play some games and see exactly how it works, we don't really know what adjustments we'll have to make. And Travis said for pitchers, particularly with the pitch clock, that everybody's, they're going to have to go out there and see how it works for everybody, because the pace might kind of work itself out for the most part. So I don't foresee it being a huge problem. I mean, we're going to probably see at some point some pitches be called or some automatic balls be called if somebody wastes too much time, but I can't imagine that it's going to be that prevalent. And if it does happen, hopefully we've worked the kinks out with about a month's worth of games in the Grapefruit and Cactus Leagues. They're not using any of that in the World Baseball Classic. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I thought it would another chance to kind of test that out. But I think spring training, they'll work out a lot of those kinks. Like you said, it's not something that I think umpires want to do, they will want to enforce. They may early on just to get the point across. But, as the season goes on, you don't want to end it at bat on a strike three because the batter didn't get in the box within 8 seconds or whatever. Sure. It is, it's not, they don't want to make that a big part of the game, but certainly early on to try to get the point across. And like I said, in spring training, I think we'll see it a lot in spring training. But yeah, it is a little bit open to interpretation there. New York and Georgia Sports Highlight says, who do you think is going to hit the first home run of 2023? You got a couple of prediction questions coming up, but Grant, I'll go with you first. Who do you think hits the first home run of 2023? I'm assuming this is of the Braves. He didn't specify, but we'll keep it in the Braves.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go Ronald Acuña Jr. first at bat of the season. Go ahead and get the year started off right. I mean, leadoff home runs and Ronald Acuña Jr. just seem to go together. Let's go with one of those. One more little caveat on the pitch clock. One thing Travis d'Arnaud added about that was he felt like, if anything, it might be more stressful later in the game when you've got like that high pressure situation, 1-run game, tie game, runners at second and third, who knows what, where that pitcher is going to feel the ultimate pressure starting to dial up a little bit because that reliever, he just came in. He might be coming into a mess. That's going to be just one more thing to think about. So I just thought I'd throw that in there as well, because that seemed to be the one scenario that a couple of different players mentioned, in particular d'Arnaud.
Yeah. That'll be, very, very interesting to see. Like I said, I can't wait to get into spring training and see the shift rule and how teams are going to adjust that. I mean, it's going to be really, really interesting spring training to see how some of these new rule changes come into effect.
Yeah. Home runs.
On the home runs, I'm going to go with the guy I just mentioned a minute ago. I'm going to go with Matt Olson. Again, I'm expecting a big season from him. I think he's going to get over 40 homers. So I'm going to go with Matt Olson. Next question from Robert Mosley, sticking kind of on the stolen base themes that we've been talking about. He says, more stolen bases in 2023, Ronald Acuña Jr. or Michael Harris II? I'll go first on this one. I'm going to say Ronald. I think he's hungry. We've talked about it. I think he wants that 40-40 season he came so close to. I don't know if he gets 50-50, as Jameson said in the chat, but I can definitely see him going for 40.
Yeah, I can see Michael Harris making a run at 30 stolen bases, maybe more than that. I just feel like with Ronald, there's some unfinished business with that 40-40 club. And there's also just that whole, he just does everything at a level to which it's hard for anybody else to keep up with him. So that both literally and figuratively here, I think he's going to be the man running the most. I think he's going to get his 40 steals. And I think there's a good chance that he's going to be among the league leaders in all of baseball, if not the guy at the very top of that list. I think that's how much he's going to look forward to running. And I asked him about it at FanFest. I said, hey, there are all these rules changes, all these things going on, limited pickoffs. You looking to steal more bases? He smiled real big and said, I'm always looking to steal bases. So that's all the answer I need to let me know that I think Ronald's the guy here.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be running, and I'm all here for it. And I really want that 40-40 season. I think it'd be something that's so unique. Not a lot of players have done, and not a lot of players who haven't used performance-enhancing drugs have done either. So would love to see that get done by Ronald. FreedFan54, if you could sign one remaining free agent to add to the team, who would it be? Guys like Peralta, Waka, Iglesias, Andrews, Naquin, and Profar wouldn't hurt. Grant, I'll let you go first on this one. Any of those names or any other free agents out there? We're obviously late in the game here, but any of those really stick out to you that the Braves could use at this point?
No, and I feel like I've always liked Peralta as kind of that, extra outfielder with some pop from the left side, but I feel like he's almost redundant with Eddie Rosario at this point. So of that list, he's probably the one that I do like the most. There was, as I was scrolling through different free agents that haven't signed, I think somebody had like a big graphic of, the best players that are still out there on the wire. One guy I was looking at was left-hander Matt Moore, who was formerly a starting pitcher, has
Yeah.
moved into a relief role, was really good with the Rangers last year. I will always say I don't think you can have too much pitching, and if the Braves could figure out a way to get a low-cost one-year deal with him, or I believe Chafin from Detroit hasn't signed either. I mean, these are some veteran arms that if they're looking for work and you're able to get them, whatever move the Braves make from a free agent standpoint, they are, air quotes, over the luxury tax. But I don't think they're going to be breaking the bank with any of these signings either. So it might be worth the overage to just make your 26-man roster that much better.
Yeah, no, I can't believe Matt Moore hasn't been signed yet. Like you said, not only can you never have enough pitching, but enough, lefties that you can stick in the bullpen. Yeah, so I'm a little surprised he hasn't been signed. But the name for me, and I still say it, is either Iglesias or Andrews. I know you're going into spring training, and it's between Grissom and Arcia, and everybody's hoping that Grissom is the guy. But if we're at that point now, you could get Iglesias and Andrews on a really small deal to come in and kind of, help, at the very least push him and help him grow as a shortstop. And if, at the very least, maybe they replace an Adrianza as far as depth. I still think, that could help just kind of improve that depth and get somebody else in spring training as well to kind of help Vaughn Grissom along in the process and push him as well.
Sure.
But there's nobody here that, really sticks out to me that I think would, elevate the roster as it stands.
No, I don't think so. And I feel like, and they've been talking about Grissom a lot. And I know as the winter went on and the Dansby Swanson saga played out as it did, and he ended up in Chicago, people kind of began to realize that, hey, maybe all this talk about Grissom is not just lip service. And I don't think that it is, honestly, from the number of people I talked to at FanFest, including Ron Washington. And then they put out that nice little 6-minute, I think, video on MLB Network that showed all of the work going on between Wash and Vaughn Grissom.
Fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid that I think that's kind of going to be the thing. Is I think it will be fun to watch him get back into his natural position, having worked, sat under the learning tree all winter long with Ron Washington. I think he's capable of playing shortstop at a good level. Will it be as good as Dansby? Probably not. But I mean, Dansby turned himself into one of the best fielding shortstops in baseball. Elvis Andrus is interesting because that's a former Ron Washington disciple right there, as far as turning him into a very good shortstop. I don't think offensively he brings a ton, but he was, I believe, nearly a 3-win player last year with the White Sox. So if those guys are hanging around, I guess it's good. But I feel like we've gotten to the point where they're going to give Vaughn Grissom every single chance to earn this job rather than go outside the organization. But if they do, then I think Vaughn Grissom needs to be playing every single day in Gwinnett, because that's the way that he's going to carve out his role for the future, is proving that he can, in fact, be that guy. And you can't do that not playing every day.
Yeah, that's kind of been the thing with me too. I've heard some people say that, if he doesn't win the job, that he sticks around in Atlanta and maybe splits time with Arcia. And I don't understand that. If he doesn't win it, then I agree with you. He needs to go to Gwinnett and continue to work on it, and so that he can become that shortstop of the future. But I agree with you. I loved watching that video on the MLB Network, him and Wash. I could have watched that all day long, and I am excited, maybe even more excited to see him in spring training and just the progress that hopefully he's made. We still need to see it, obviously happen during games, but certainly has me even more pumped up for him going into spring training. I got a lot of other questions to get to, but I need to get some energy to do so. So you may need to go grab you a Built Bar if you're listening to this for the last segment here. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. Just got through the holiday season. I know my goal was to eat a little healthier this year. Haven't really gone through on that, Grant, but Built Bars are helping me get there as well. If you want to get healthier but don't want to compromise the taste, then you got to try Built Bar. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. They're so delicious you won't think they're good for you. And again, they're perfect for your New Year's resolution if you still got yours going. If you look at the macros for a Built Bar, it's only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been telling you about how you can order Built Bars at Built.com, which you could still do. But now you can head to your local Walmart or Sam's Club as well to pick up a box of Built Bars. So make sure you do that today. Go out to Walmart or Sam's Club and get you either a 4-bar box or a 13-bar box with hit flavors like a brownie, a batter, and double chocolate and cookies and cream, which is my favorite. So go out and grab yourself a box of Built Bars today. All right, Grant, we got a lot of other great questions I want to get into here. Gus says, What stat line do you expect for Jordon Luplow to put up? Could we see 20 homers if everything goes right? So we're getting deep into the weeds here now. We're looking at 20 homers for Jordon Luplow. I don't know that he's going to get the playing time. He's on the wrong side of a platoon to get that much playing time. If that happens, it would be wonderful. I just don't see him getting the at-bats for that to happen.
Yeah, it would be, I mean, great. And obviously the Braves went out and getting him knowing that offensively in a platoon, he could be a plus player. So we'll see if he's able to, really contribute a lot, because if you're the left-handed swinger in this one, which would be Eddie Rosario, you would figure he'd get more at bats. And of course, the wild card in all of this is Marcell Ozuna. I don't expect to see him a lot in left field, but he is around. And as Brian Snitker has indicated many times and did again at FanFest, if Marcel's here, then we're going to see, if he can, in fact, find what he used to be and help us win some baseball games. So putting that aside is kind of the elephant in the room with all of this. How does that affect DH? How does Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud's at-bats affect DH as well? Could Luplow get in that mix maybe and find himself some? Potentially. I don't think 20 homers is most likely, but I think he's a guy that can put up double-digit homers, even playing sparingly in a platoon and maybe catching some DH at-bats.
Yeah, he definitely has that pop. Like, if he got 400, 500 at bats, I'd say he gets 20 home runs pretty easy. I just don't think he's going to get that level of playing time. Kevin Pillar is going to fight for a spot on the roster and ended up actually not playing for Team Israel as he was going to in order to do that with the Braves in spring training. Should we realistically be thinking he can make the opening day roster if he proves his ilk?
Possibly. I mean, he's a guy that I feel like, Brian Snitker talked about him some too, that they were really impressed with the kind of player that he's been. And I think everybody remembers a couple of years ago, that crazy hit by pitch when he got struck in the face. And, the way that he handled all of that and just the kind of player that he is, I think is somebody that the Braves are going to be happy to have in camp this year. Now, realistically making the roster, I mean, you're probably looking at the 26th man there, and it's going to be battling with the Sam Hilliards and Eli Whites and maybe even the Jordon Luplows to a certain extent. In addition to having Eddie Rosario and Marcell Ozuna in that left field mix. So possibly, but, we're going to kind of find out over the next 5 or 6 weeks. And the best thing about, I think, some of these signings are, that there are guys who come in and are open at least to the fact of maybe, or the possibility of perhaps going to AAA to wait for their opportunity, because over the course of a long season, your team's depth is going to be tested in a number of different ways.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about all these outfielders they brought in. Yeah, they brought in a lot, and they're, to an extent hoping that one of these guys gets going. But there is certainly great depth there, and I think that's what Pillar is going to be. I don't think, if I'm projecting now, I don't think he makes the opening day roster, but I think he is great depth, and he's a veteran for sure. So would love to keep him around. And then last question from Gus. He says, what do we actually know about Sam Hilliard? Sticking on the outfielders here. I don't know a ton about him other than maybe a good glove, but a weak bat. Is that a far off description? I don't think that's far off. I think that's pretty, on point with what we know about him. Solid defender. Never really came around with the bat. I think it's one of those things where the Braves are hoping, they can help him make maybe a swing adjustment and unlock the bat. But at the very least, get somebody who could be a solid backup fourth outfielder.
Yeah, and I think this is another guy where if you have the opportunity to end up stashing him at the AAA level, maybe that's what you're looking at there. Ultimately, when we talk about people maybe not really finding it with the bat, and then you discover that they were in Colorado for a while, that feels a little bit troubling, though not alarming, but that's at least a little bit odd. It seems like kind of an oxymoron. Well, he was in Colorado and he couldn't hit. Can he hit anywhere else? But perhaps so. And I just feel like this is going at the outfield depth question by bringing in as many viable candidates as you can and bringing in some different types of players and seeing who might just impress you the most in spring training.
Yeah, and one of those obviously they're looking at as well is Eddie Rosario. And Corey Slovic says, if you could choose between one of Ozuna or Rosario's best seasons for them to repeat their best season in 2023, who would you choose? That's a tough question, because if you go with Ozuna's 2020 season, which was a short season, I mean, that season right there was MVP caliber, but it was obviously a small sample size. But I'd probably say Ozuna's best season in his prime, whether one of his years with the Marlins or that shortened season with the Braves, probably is better than Rosario's best year. But I think Rosario's had, more consistent years in his career.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's too far off. But even if you just kind of use that question to say, if you could pick one of them to have like the bounce back year, whatever that looks like, even if it's not like new career highs and, perhaps, going after a triple crown the way Ozuna did in 2020, putting that aside and just being even more realistic, I feel like the money's on Ozuna, but if I had to pick between the two, it might be more important for Eddie Rosario, to be honest with you, because I feel like the Braves can cover DH. It's just, what are they getting out of their investment in Marcell? And the answer to that has been little to nothing in the last couple of years. And clearly it's been problematic beyond just what's not happening when he's in the lineup. So it is a tough question. It's a very tough question, but I feel like if I'm looking at stability for this club and a place that they really need some answers, I feel like left field would be one of those. And the healthy Eddie Rosario bouncing back, I think would mean a lot for just the continuity and the stability of this club, because I just feel like they have enough bats that they could throw at the DH spot if they need to.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a good chance that Rosario could have a bounce back season to the point that he's an average, hitter. I don't think he's going to be average or definitely not above average defensively in left field, but I think he has the opportunity now, further removed from that eye surgery, to be an average hitter once again, which, like you said, with the rest of the Braves lineup, it's all you're looking for out of left field. If you can get a 2-WAR player, a 2-win player in left field with the rest of the Braves lineup, I think you'll be satisfied with that. Final question from Twitter. Annabelle Self says, why is starting pitching so expensive? Fried lost arbitration and the Braves offered him more than the MLB trade rumors projected. I love Fried and he's one of the best in the league, but why should a team pay $15 million for someone who plays every 5 days? Well, Grant, obviously you want to hear your thoughts on this, but top of the line pitching is so rare to find. The Braves have been looking for one for 20 years almost, until they found Max Fried, to find a true ace. And if you can find that, then it becomes very valuable. And yeah, I never really talked about this on the podcast the other day. The Braves did, quote unquote, win that arbitration case against him, and it was even more than what MLB trade rumors projected. And they're always really good at those projections. But this guy's been top 5 in the Cy Young the last 2 years. I mean, he's obviously proved his worth, and whatever amount that they would have awarded him, I think would have been fair. But I just think front of the rotation pitching, when you can find it, it is very valuable to teams.
Yeah, and it's hard to find, and it's even harder, it seems like, to keep around. And you see a lot of just good starting pitchers being in high demand around the trade deadline and what teams can get for them. So you see them moving around a lot as well. Well, the Braves are not in a place where they're looking to trade away, starting pitchers without making some other, I would say, blockbuster move, if they were even to consider that. And I don't think that they are. But yeah, it's always been kind of odd that every 5th day, a starting pitcher gets to affect the game. But when you are as good as some of these pitchers are, and I think Max Fried has entered into that class, it's just hard to find good help in that regard. So Max Fried's greatness is, I think, what made him a front of the rotation starting pitcher. He's gotten better every single year. I think he's added 3 pitches to his arsenal since he's come to the major leagues. About all that's left for him to do is master the knuckleball. He's been that good. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's going to try to do that this year, but yeah, it's just hard to find guys that do the kinds of things that Max Fried, let alone when you start talking about guys that have done it for a long time, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, some of these others that are all on their way to Cooperstown. It's rare. And because of the rarity, the market definitely reflects the cost of doing business if you're trying to sign free agent starting pitchers.
It is. And I wanted to point this out too as well, because I know there was a Twitter war going on over the arbitration Max Fried loss, and I haven't addressed it here yet, but that hearing has no effect on what's going to happen to him in free agency. An arbiter is the one who decides, who, quote unquote, again, wins that process. That has no effect on what happens in free agency. I still believe he's gone after 2 years. I think he's going to hit free agency and get a big deal somewhere, and that's certainly his right. But if he does that, it will not be because he, quote unquote, lost this arbitration hearing. There's another question in the chat section. I believe you started there, from Hayden McRaney. He says, if we're signing any pitcher to a 1-year deal, it should be Bauer. Can't believe he's being shunned. Not to really get in much of the off-field details here, but I think a lot of you have probably seen the video when Brian Snitker was asked this, and he just very firmly said no. And I don't think, again, not really trying to get into the ethics of what happened off the field, I don't think that's something the Braves want in their clubhouse. And that's kind of hypocritical to say with what's happening with Ozuna, but they're already paying Ozuna. So it's a little bit, different situation. But I just don't think, that's something that the Braves, are wanting to take on right now. Even as good a pitcher as Trevor Bauer may be, I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, and you also have to think about the fact that Trevor Bauer has been sitting out for quite a while. He got one of the longest suspensions and the longest under that domestic violence policy that anyone's ever gotten, and that's going to make it difficult for him to find work. And I'll put aside all of the ethics and all the judgments and things that are going to go clearly into that, and I'm not going to argue one way or another about how you should or should not feel about it. But I think it was pretty clear that the Braves are not looking for that kind of potential distraction, and the fact that it's kind of an unknown and they're in such good shape. I mean, I know that if you're thinking about, well, if you could go get a Prime Cy Young Award winner, why wouldn't you do that? But again, he's been away from the game for quite some time. There's no guarantees, but the one thing that has followed him around in his career has been some negative attention, if you want to call it that. There's been some rumblings or discussions, and some of them not very quiet, that people don't really enjoy being in the same room with him. So I just don't think that's something the Braves are actively going out there and recruiting. And that's putting Marcell Ozuna off to the side, because while he may have gotten himself into some off-field troubles himself, I don't think that there's been a lot of discussion about him being a poor teammate. And I think that that's something that, as cliched as it sounds, might kind of be one of the deciding factors here. You just don't want to invite more unknowns, more trouble, more variables, and more potentially not great situations into that clubhouse if you don't have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question here from Joe Mixon. He says, can you see the balanced schedule benefiting the Braves by playing elite teams like the Mets and Phillies less and playing teams like Kansas City and Oakland more? And not something we really talked a ton about, but the balancing schedule, Grant, I think it does benefit a team like the Braves and the other teams in the division as well, like the Mets and Phillies, who will get to play some of those, central teams. I don't want to call them out, but get to play those central teams a lot more, as both of those divisions right now are kind of down, especially at the bottom end there. I think it will be a big benefit to the Braves.
I think it'll be helpful. I mean, if you have the choice between, playing 3 to 6 or however many games it is against the Oakland Athletics or 6 more games against the New York Mets, I think you'd pick those A's games for obvious reasons, but you're going to play some of the other good teams across the American League and across the National League for that matter. So I think everybody ultimately, as I'm sure is what the point is, everybody's going to play the same schedule. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I am excited about the variation that we're now going to get, because 19 games against any club. I mean, yes, the Braves and Mets head-to-head this year, man, there were some exciting games that came out of that. The Braves kind of got their teeth kicked in early on, then they turned it on, and that season series ended up being a big deciding factor for the overall division win for the Braves. But 19 against the Marlins, 19 against the Nationals. I mean, I love baseball, but it kind of feels like Groundhog Day sometimes when you're just feeling like you're stuck in the same time loop and the same 4 teams that you're playing all the time.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me is that Mike Trout's going into his 30s. I think he's played in Atlanta once, maybe. Yeah. I know he was supposed to come here this past year. I had tickets ready to go, and unfortunately he was injured, but it gives you a chance to see some of those stars more regularly in your hometown. I think that's great. And it is great, especially with the extra wild cards. They need the balanced schedule to be more balanced, to make it a little bit more fair for those wild card spots. It's not fair. I believe it was the 2020 season where you had the expanded postseason and you had 4 NL Central teams get in and they all got eliminated in the first round. It's just, that's, it's not fair when that's the case and the schedule isn't balanced like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things I think that this could lend itself to. As we've seen, expanded playoffs is going to be something that Major League Baseball is really pushing for. The Players Union seems to be open to this idea. Clearly, there was so much talk about, agreeing to this playoffs thing that, the players maybe didn't want, but the owners made it it had to be in there. It was a must for them. And we got the expanded playoffs. And I'm not against the expanded playoffs. I'm interested to see how they tweak it, because we also saw the wild card finally become truly 3 games, and that seems to be the way they're doing it rather than the 1-game wild cards. But I also feel like game 163 is something that, if you have to play it, would be worth playing, and that kind of went away at this point. But I always felt like the 1-game wild card was something I wanted to see go away. I got my wish, but it got a lot more involved and convoluted, if you will, with this expanded playoffs business. But I think it's something baseball will continue to look at and continue to try to find ways to refine.
Yeah, for sure. There'll be some more changes coming, especially if expansion ever comes along as well. That'll shake things up. But appreciate all the questions as always. Thank you so much. Thank you, Grant, for joining. And Grant, I know you said you're going to be down in spring training. I don't know if you wanted to kind of give those dates again and let everybody know where they can find your podcast and all your other work.
Yeah, so you can find From the Diamond wherever you find your podcast. If you need links to anything else I'm doing, you can go to FromTheDiamond.com and find it there. The show will also be live starting on February 26th. That's Sunday, and I'll be live on Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So 92.9 The Game in Atlanta is where you can tune into that. If you do miss the show for whatever reason, don't worry. I'll upload it. It'll be a podcast. I'll have all kinds of interviews and things that'll be coming out of the spring training trip that I'm making. I'll be there from the 15th through the 22nd. So you can catch me on 92.9 The Game. You can also find all of the things I'm doing on From the Diamond, or just follow me on Twitter at Grant McCauley. And I'll keep you up to date on everything that I'm seeing and hearing and getting into down in Northport. But I'm excited to have baseball back.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous you're getting to go down there and get things started with the team. Should be a lot of fun, but I can't wait for the games to get going. Can't wait for the season to get here, and we are so close. Well, Grant, again, thank you so much. Thank you again to all the listeners submitting the questions on Twitter and in the chat as well. That would do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Now go make a Locked On MLB Prospects your second listen. I'm going to have Lindsey Crosby on with me on Monday going over my top 5 Atlanta Braves prospects in the system. So make sure that you tune in for that on Monday as well. Be doing that show with Lindsey Crosby, host of Locked On MLB Prospects. Again, thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. You can follow me at ShortstopBall. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.